Good evening, and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Jackie Kemp. I'm a journalist and writer, and you can find my free to read newsletter at substack.com. I do that once a week. So today we're going to look at some of the news stories that have been breaking in the headlines today. We're going to start with the Ukraine update, day 498. At least 5 people have been killed and 34 injured in a missile strike on Ukraine's western city of Lviv. Emergency services said that 7 people have been rescued from the rubble. Regional Governor Maxim Kostyke said that the Air Force destroyed 7 cruise missiles aimed at the region. The roof and top floor of the building were destroyed in what Lviv's mayor called the biggest attack of the war on civilian infrastructure. Lviv is far from front lines and home to thousands displaced by war. The mayor declared a 2-day mourning period. In a TV interview broadcast Wednesday, President Zelensky said that slow weapons deliveries to Ukraine had delayed Kiev's planned counteroffensive, allowing Russia to bolster its defences in occupied areas, including with mines. President Zelensky arrived in Sofia in Bulgaria today to hold talks with Prime Minister Nikolai Denkov and President Rumen Radev. President Zelensky will visit Turkey on Friday for talks with President Recep Erdogan on the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko, who last month brokered a deal to end Wagner's armed mutiny, has said the mercenary head Yevgeny Prigozhin has returned to Russia. Sweden joining NATO is within reach, Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg told reporters on Thursday following a meeting in Brussels. Nikolai Patrushev, the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, has claimed that Ukraine had directed more than 70 drone attacks at occupied Crimea this year. The International Atomic Energy Agency has appealed for greater access to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Kiev accused Russia of preparing a catastrophic act of sabotage. The Ukrainian Interior Minister Ihor Kolimenko said that a man who detonated explosives in a courthouse in the Ukrainian capital Kiev on Wednesday has died. President Biden told Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson on Wednesday that he's looking forward to the country's stalled NATO membership bid winning final approval as the Western Alliance prepares for next week's summit. UN Trade Chief Rebecca Grinspan has said the UN is making every effort to ensure that the Black Sea grain deal and a memorandum of understanding to facilitate access of Russian fertilizer and other products to global markets are extended. Russia's defense ministry said on Wednesday that Russian forces struck 3 Ukrainian army groups near Bakhmut amid conflicting reports about fighting in the area. Russian President Vladimir Putin's former election spokesman has been appointed to run the state news agency TASS, according to a government order published on Wednesday. So that's the Ukrainian roundup for today. And now we'll move on to some UK stories. The First Minister calls for the UK government to secure the future of the Horizon Research Funding Programme. Hamza Yousaf has written to Rishi Sunak urging him to urgently secure the UK's future in the Horizon Europe Research and Innovation Programme. The First Minister said full association in the European programme is vital to maintaining Scotland's world-renowned reputation in these areas. The sector's future level of participation in the £95 billion Horizon programme has been uncertain since the UK government's decision to pursue a hard Brexit. The path has been opened for the UK government to reach a deal to fully access the scheme following the Windsor Framework Agreement with the European Union on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Discussions between the UK government and the European Union are taking place, and the First Minister has said it's vital that an agreement is reached to ensure that Brexit is not allowed to damage Scotland's research and innovation sectors further. Keir Starmer refuses to commit to funding for free school meals in England. Sir Keir Starmer has refused to commit to supporting free school meals for all primary school children in England, as he stuck to a tough fiscal position despite pressure from inside and outside his party. Of course, in Scotland, free school meals are provided to children up to P6, and some P6 and 7s are getting them. The UK leader has also declined to commit to 6.5% pay rise for teachers, as he urged the government to resolve this dispute at the centre of strike action. Speaking before a keynote education-themed speech setting out his fifth and final mission aimed at removing barriers to opportunity, he said, "We'll have to wait and see what the pay review body proposes." Starmer said there was a healthy debate taking place across all of society, and particularly in the Labour Party, when he was pressed about committing to free school meals. Asked if funding was part of why he would not support the policy, he replied, "Money's a big factor. I won't shy away from that." Of course, in Scotland, 52% of school children get free school meals. In England, it's much lower than that. I think it's below 20%. The SNP has today challenged both Sir Keir Starmer and Anis Sarwar to commit to scrapping the two-child benefit cap and rape clause introduced by the Conservatives after the 2015 UK general election. However, the Labour leader said that abolishing the cap isn't a Labour Party policy. Senior Scottish Labour Party figures have condemned the Labour Party's position on the two-child cap, with Monica Lennon MSP describing the policy as abhorrent. Commenting, the SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn said, "With each passing day, pro-Brexit Labour become more and more indistinguishable from the Tories. Keir Starmer's failure to commit to abolishing the cruel and callous two-child benefit cap will have shocked voters right across these aisles, leaving many wondering what the Labour Party actually stand for. It's incumbent on both Sir Keir and Anis Sarwar to confirm that a future Labour UK government would scrap this callous and cruel policy on day one. Failure to do so will confirm that Labour aren't offering real change. They're only offering to copy disgraceful Tory policies." Oh dear. So, study finds austerity has resulted in the quality of care declining in key areas in NHS England. The quality of care that the NHS provides has got worse in many key areas, and patients' long waits to access treatment could become even more common, research has found. Just raise that a bit. The Tory Lib Dem coalition government's austerity programme in the early 2010s led to the health service no longer being able to meet key waiting time targets, the Nuffield Trust and Health Foundation said. Austerity in the UK ushered in really concerning deterioration across the board in the overall quality of NHS care, as judged by patients' experience and prevention of ill health, not just speed of access. The big fall in the UK government's funding of the NHS in England produced a turning point. Sorry? Sorry. Sorry, I can't see myself actually. How's that? Is that any better? Sorry. Um, Austerity in the UK ushered in really concerning deterioration across the board in the overall quality of NHS care, as judged by patients' experience and prevention of ill health, not just speed of access. The big fall in the UK government's funding of the NHS in England produced a turning point that meant its quality of care began to decline between mid-2013 and mid-2014, and has got progressively worse since the study concluded. Analysis by the two think tanks' Joint Quality Watch programme, which monitors more than 150 indicators of care quality over time, found that in England, fewer people with long-term health conditions such as cancer, diabetes and depression are getting enough help to manage their condition. Breast cancer screening rates for women aged 53 to 74 have fallen. It has become harder for patients to see a named GP. Only 6% of midwives think their maternity unit has enough staff to do its job properly. The study found that the largest collapse in performance against key targets was in the NHS's ability to treat A&E patients within 4 hours, provide surgery within 18 weeks, or get an ambulance to treat people quickly after a 999 call. Some delays were so great that they put patients at risk of real harm, it said. Reduced funding for the NHS and public services in England resulted in a significant reduction in the funding which Scotland receives in the Scottish Government's block grant, which is determined as a fixed proportion of UK government spending through the Barnett formula. Despite this, recently it emerged that Scotland's A&E waiting times are significantly better than they are in England. England was measuring them differently, but they've now started to measure them the same way as Scotland, and the figures reveal that Scotland's doing quite a bit better on that one. You can look at Believe in Scotland if you want to hear more about that. UK retailers accused of overcharging on petrol and other goods. The Governor of the Bank of England has accused retailers of putting further strain on households by overcharging consumers on petrol and other goods at a time when UK authorities are struggling to curb inflation. Andrew Bailey suggested unnecessarily high fuel prices would have to be tackled in order to help bring inflation, which is above 8%, back to the bank's 2% target and give some relief to families struggling with the cost of living. He added that action by regulators, including the Competition and Markets Authority, CMA, was helping to subdue high inflation, but it was fairer, if possible, that overcharging was tackled. Bailey's comments will heap further pressure on petrol retailers, which the UK Government Energy Secretary Grant Shapps accused this week of using motorists as cash cows after the CMA found fuel sellers were charging more because of reduced competition since the COVID crisis. Watchdogs, including the CMA last week, agreed to a series of measures aimed at protecting customers from being ripped off. Concerns have been growing about wide greedflation, whereby companies use high inflation as a cover to raise prices even further to increase profit margins. The government has now instructed regulators to crack down on unfair price hikes across the country. Last month, the chief executive of Tesco, Ken Murphy, urged the government to help tackle inflation by easing regulations linked to Brexit, which he said had a meaningful impact on the cost of importing groceries into the UK from the EU. The Bank of England has raised interest rates to 5%, the highest since 2008, a move Bailey insisted was necessary to curb price inflation in general, even though it put further pressure on borrowers. So, of course, the government doesn't really want to talk about Brexit, and nor does the Labour Party. And so I think some of the greedflation headlines are actually, I'm sure that's part of that problem, but I think the Brexit is the elephant in the room that we need to confront what that's doing to the price of imports and exports. The UK government loses legal challenge over Boris Johnson's WhatsApp messages. The UK government has lost its legal challenge to block Boris Johnson's unredacted WhatsApps, notebooks and diaries from being handed over to the official COVID inquiry after a ruling by the High Court. Judges said the diaries and notebooks were very likely to contain information about decision-making during the COVID pandemic, erring on the side of the inquiry chair, Heather Hallett. They described the terms of reference for the inquiry as very wide and suggested Lady Hallett's team should be allowed to fish for documents with an informed but speculative request. In a ruling handed down today, the judges decided Hallett could see all WhatsApps requested, but hand back those she deemed irrelevant without them being disclosed to third parties. The UK government said it would fully comply, but defended its decision to launch a judicial review to clarify Hallett's powers under the 2005 Inquiries Act. Lawyers for the Cabinet Office had argued during the one-day evidence hearing last Friday that Hallett's request was so broad it was bound to catch a large amount of material unconnected to COVID. But the inquiry's lead counsel said the idea that the Cabinet Office could decide which documents were relevant would emasculate this and future inquiries. Amar Anwar, the lead solicitor acting on behalf of the Scottish COVID bereaved at both the Scottish and UK public inquiries, said he welcomed today's judgment in favour of the UK COVID-19 inquiry. The Scottish COVID bereaved found it distressing that the inquiries needed to defend their rightful demand for evidence from the Cabinet Office in court, but are glad they did. So that's a can of worms that we're about to see opened. House of Commons, we hope. House of Commons Committee on Standards recommends ex-Tory whip be suspended from the House of Commons for 8 weeks. Rishi Sunak faces the prospect of another by-election after a parliamentary report on groping allegations against Chris Pincher recommended that the former government whip be suspended as an MP for 8 weeks. If approved by MPs, the suspension will automatically trigger a recall petition in Pincher's constituency of Tamworth. 10% of constituents signed the petition. That will force a by-election. Pincher said he'd first seen the report on this morning and would take time to read it carefully and reflect on it properly. However, the publication prompted calls by opposition MPs for Pincher's resignation. So what will that be, the fourth or fifth by-election? The Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, said Pincher's actions were shocking. But what's even worse is the way the Conservative Party protected him, even promoting him despite a previous investigation into his conduct. The report said that the behaviour of Pincher, who was the government's deputy chief whip last summer when he was accused of drunkenly assaulting 2 men at the exclusive Carlton Club in London, represented an abuse of power as he was in a position of authority. His actions had a significant impact on the individuals concerned, one of whom said it had affected his health and well-being and caused him concern for his future work prospects. The affair was the final straw for cabinet support for Boris Johnson, who was already battling to remain as Prime Minister while being dogged by Partygate. Johnson had appointed the MP to the senior role overseeing party discipline, despite being aware of an official complaint about Pincher's prior behaviour. The report is the conclusion of an inquiry by House of Commons Committee on Standards into whether Pincher's actions caused significant damage to the reputation of the House. Pincher, who resigned from his position and later lost the Tory whip, told the committee of MPs who compiled the report he did not wish to give oral evidence but provided further written evidence. The cross-party committee, chaired by the Labour MP Chris Bryant, said it had agreed Pincher's conduct caused significant damage to the reputation of the government and to the Prime Minister who appointed him. The committee found a number of aggregating factors: Pincher's senior role, the impact of his behaviour on the individuals, and the fact there was more than one instance of his behaviour on the evening in question, and his heavy intoxication. More by-elections. The SNP MP leads debate calling for an end to the bishop's right to sit in the House of Lords. SNP MP and chair of the all-party parliamentary humanist group Tommy Shepherd led a debate in Westminster calling for an end to bishops' automatic right to sit in the unelected House of Lords today. It comes as polling shows that people in Scotland overwhelmingly want the bishops out of the Lords. A YouGov poll found that 71% of adults in Scotland favour removing the bishops, with only 7% favouring keeping them. The only other sovereign country where clerics speak and vote in Parliament is Iran. In the UK, 26 bishops enjoy numerous privileges over ordinary peers, including advanced consultation privileges on legislation, extra speaking rights in the chamber, and exemptions from the Code of Conduct. Stressing the privilege, which is enjoyed by representatives of no other faith or belief group, Mr. Shepherd said the appointment of bishops to the unelected chamber is a hangover from feudal times and has no place in a modern pluralistic society. Commenting, Tommy Shepherd said, "Bishops appointed by the Church of England to sit, speak and vote in Parliament don't represent the beliefs or faith groups of most citizens across the UK, and yet enjoy a place amongst other unelected lords in an entirely undemocratic second chamber. The laws that keep in place their automatic right to sit in the unelected House of Lords are a hangover from feudal times and have no place in a modern pluralistic society. Their presence is an insult to other religions and beliefs and is against centuries of progressive development to separate church and state." Although I'd have thought that having the bishops in it is one of the lesser problems of the House of Lords. People in there include Malcolm Offord, who's a Minister of State for Scotland, despite having no democratic right to be there, no other position other than having been a propagandist in the 2014 referendum and a donor to the Tory party. He represents Scotland abroad. He sits in judgment over what the Scottish Parliament wants to do, and he's not the only person in that kind of position. There are other government ministers who are there in the UK Parliament because they're in the Lords, and they're completely unelected. There's also Evgeny Lebedev. So I'd have thought the House of Lords ought to be abolished, really. I don't think removing the bishops is enough. Shell CEO under fire for saying cutting fossil fuel production is dangerous. Climate campaigners have condemned a cynical suggestions by the CEO of the energy company Shell that cutting the world's oil and gas production would be dangerous and irresponsible. Wael Sawan claimed in an interview that reducing fossil fuel production, which is considered crucial in limiting the rise in global temperatures, risked worsening the cost of living crisis. While someone claimed in an interview that reducing fossil fuel production, which is considered crucial in limiting the rise in global temperatures, risked worsening the cost of living crisis by limiting global energy supplies and pushing up bills. Shell's chief executive, who took up the post last September, also argued that poorer countries would bear the brunt of a gas shortfall if they were unable to compete for shipments on the global market. His comments defending ongoing oil and gas production, which experts say is incompatible with global climate goals, underline the shift in approach at Shell under his reign towards prioritising fossil fuels and increasing payouts to shareholders. And notably, they take huge amounts of a finite natural resource from the North Sea, and yet they have, apart from this year, they haven't paid any tax for 5 or 6 years. Go figure. Last month, Shell announced it was abandoning plans to cut oil extraction each year for the rest of the decade. Jamie Peters, the head of climate at Friends of the Earth, said it was utterly ironic for Shell to be calling anything dangerous and irresponsible. He pointed out that the comments follow news of the hottest June on record and searing heat waves, and argued that it shows just how out of touch Shell is. Peters said that Shell CEO's comments were incompatible with the urgent need to invest in clean, cheap renewables and energy efficiency so everyone benefits from lower prices and a safe green future. Last month, Shell announced it would hold its gas production and oil production steady until 2030, after previously saying it would cut output by 1 to 2% each year. Sawan is understood to have backtracked on the company's modest climate goals in order to take advantage of higher fossil fuel profits, which have been driven by the war in Ukraine. The surge in global energy prices following Russia's invasion of Ukraine early last year helped Shell more than double its annual profits for the year to $40 billion, compared with $19 billion in 2021. Terrible. All right. So, a more positive story now. The first malaria vaccine to be rolled out in 12 African countries. A long-awaited vaccine for malaria has been announced for a rollout across 12 African countries over the next 2 years, potentially saving tens of thousands of lives. An initial 18 million doses of the world's first malaria vaccine have been assigned to the countries where the risk of children falling ill and dying from malaria is highest, according to a statement from the Global Vaccine Alliance, the World Health Organization, and UNICEF. This vaccine has the potential to be very impactful in the fight against malaria, and when broadly deployed alongside other interventions, it can prevent tens of thousands of deaths every year, said Tabani Mafosa, country programs delivery at Gavi. Another 16 African countries have asked for access to the vaccine and will be hoping for supplies when production has been scaled up. The vaccine, named RTS-AS01, was declared safe and effective in reducing deaths and severe illness after being given to 1.7 million children in Ghana, Kenya, and Malawi since 2019. It will now be given to Benin, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, Niger, Sierra Leone, and Uganda, with doses expected to arrive in the final quarter of this year. UNICEF's Associate Director of Immunization, Ephraim Lamango, said the vaccine will help fight a disease that kills almost 500,000 children under 5 in Africa every year. The vaccine is being produced by GlaxoSmithKline, with an expected 60 million doses needed each year. By 2026, the Indian company Bharat Biotech is expected to be involved in supply. Dr. Kate O'Brien, the Director of Immunization, Vaccines and Biologicals at the World Health Organization, said the vaccine is a breakthrough for malaria-affected communities. The high demand for the vaccine and the strong reach of childhood immunization will increase equity and access to malaria prevention and save many young lives. We will work tirelessly to increase supply until all children at risk have access, said O'Brien. Another vaccine, the R21, developed at Oxford University, is awaiting WHO pre-qualification and will also be manufactured by an Indian company, the Serum Institute. Future of St Andrew's Botanic Garden secured. The long-term future of St Andrew's Botanic Garden has been secured following the signing of a 40-year lease agreement by the St Andrew's Botanic Garden Trust and site owners, the University of St Andrews. The new agreement represents a shared commitment to the long-term management of the Botanic Garden, enabling new opportunities for investment and further skills development, as well as increased community involvement. The 40-year lease builds on recent initiatives which have seen considerable investment in botanical programs, education and community support. Examples of recent initiatives that demonstrate the changing role of St Andrew's Botanic Garden include the Tangled Bank, a flagship conservation project that investigates the impact of climate change on temperate habitats, and community programs such as the Planting for Your Peace project, which provides opportunities for people struggling with mental health conditions to connect and build relationships. Harry Watkins, Executive Director at St Andrew's Botanic Garden, said recent changes within the Botanic Garden have resulted in increased visitor numbers. Visits by students at the university have tripled over the past 3 years, while visits by local residents have doubled. However, he said that these changes were just the beginning, and the shift in visitor patterns provides a sound footing for the future. Dr. Watkins explained that the St Andrew's Botanic Garden is currently developing a master plan which will enable opportunities for further investment and development so that it can meet ambitious targets for sustainability, conservation and education, underpinned by partnership working within Fife as well as internationally. Well, that's it for this evening. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who's donated and to everyone who's signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We've set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. Good night and thank you for watching.